The strange thing about human thoughts, the Queen said softly, is that they never stay still. Daniel Carter had not spoken a single word since the guards brought him into the throne hall, yet the vast chamber seemed louder than a crowded stadium. Warm air drifted through the towering arches of living crystal, carrying a faint scent like rain on hot stone. Above him the ceiling stretched nearly 200 feet high, glowing with slow pulses of violet light that moved like distant lightning inside clouds. Daniel stood alone at the center of a circular floor carved from smooth pale mineral, his boots planted shoulder-width apart, his breathing steady. Around the outer ring of the chamber, alien officials watched in silence, their tall silhouettes outlined by columns that shimmered like glass filled with starlight. And walking slowly toward him was the ruler of this world. Queen Valera of the Thalran Empire was nearly 8 feet tall, her turquoise skin reflecting the light like polished sea glass. Long silver strands flowed down her back, moving gently as if stirred by a breeze that Daniel couldn't feel. Her golden eyes studied him with calm curiosity, the way a scientist might observe a rare phenomenon. She stopped a few feet away and tilted her head slightly. "You haven't spoken since you arrived," she said, though her lips barely moved because the voice Daniel heard echoed directly inside his mind. The sensation felt like someone whispering through the walls of his skull. Daniel didn't answer. He had learned something important the moment she first spoke inside his head. Silence didn't stop her from hearing him. The Queen's eyes brightened faintly. "Yes," she continued, a hint of amusement appearing in her expression. "I can hear every thought that passes through your mind." Daniel's heartbeat thumped once against his ribs. He tried to clear his thoughts the way meditation instructors back on Earth had once taught him during long training flights. But it was like trying to calm the ocean during a storm. Images flickered anyway, the cramped cockpit of his survey shuttle, warning alarms flashing red, the moment his engines failed above this alien world. The Queen watched him carefully. "Interesting," she murmured. "Your mind moves faster than most." Daniel swallowed slowly. He realized something else then. She wasn't threatening him. She sounded fascinated. The alien officials around the chamber shifted uneasily as if they didn't share her curiosity. One of them whispered something in a language Daniel couldn't understand, but the Queen lifted one slender hand, and the entire hall fell quiet again. Her attention returned to him. "Humans," she said thoughtfully inside his mind, "are famous for unpredictable thinking." Daniel let out a slow breath through his nose. He decided if she could hear his thoughts, hiding them was pointless. So he allowed one honest thought to surface. "She looks tired." The Queen froze. It lasted less than a second, but Daniel noticed. Her golden eyes widened ever so slightly before narrowing again. For a long moment, she simply stared at him as if trying to examine something invisible. Then she stepped closer, her shadow stretching across the pale floor until it touched his boots. "That," she said quietly inside his head, "is not what most beings think when they see me." Daniel lifted his chin just a little. He still didn't speak. But in his mind, he formed another thought, simple and clear. Maybe they've never looked closely. The Queen's faint smile returned, but this time it carried something new. Curiosity. Queen Valera did not step away from the human. Instead, she circled him slowly, her long silver hair gliding across her shoulders like liquid starlight, while the vast chamber hummed with quiet energy. Daniel Carter felt the temperature of the room settle around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, comfortable but strangely still, as if even the air was waiting for the next thought to form in his mind. The Queen's voice returned inside his head, softer this time. "You believe I am tired. That was your first clear thought about me." Daniel kept his face neutral but allowed another thought to surface naturally, because pretending was useless now. Anyone who listens to thousands of minds every day would be tired. The Queen stopped again. The alien officials watching from the outer ring shifted uneasily, their tall forms whispering among themselves in low tones, but she ignored them completely. Her golden eyes remained fixed on Daniel, as if he had just shown her a new star in the sky. "Fascinating," she said quietly within his mind. "Most beings think of power when they see me. Fear, authority, dominion. But you think of fatigue." Daniel shrugged slightly. He still had not spoken out loud. "If you can hear everything anyway, talking seems unnecessary." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through her mind like distant bells. "That is true," she admitted. Yet humans often speak even when silence would serve them better. Daniel let another thought drift upward before he could stop it. Humans also think even when it causes trouble. The Queen smiled faintly. Yes, that part is very obvious. She took another slow step around him, examining him from a different angle as if trying to map the invisible storm inside his head. Daniel noticed something strange while she listened. Instead of digging into his memories, she seemed to be watching the way his thoughts moved. Quick fragments surfaced without warning. The smell of engine coolant from his survey shuttle, the wide Texas sky where he had learned to fly small aircraft when he was 16 years old, the taste of cheap diner coffee during long training nights back on Earth. None of those thoughts were important, yet they appeared and vanished like sparks from a campfire. The Queen's expression shifted slightly with every one of them. Your mind does not stay on one path, she said slowly. It branches constantly. Daniel finally spoke aloud, his voice calm but rough from hours of silence. That is normal where I come from. The sound of his voice echoed softly through the crystal hall. Several alien officials stiffened as if the human had suddenly broken an ancient rule. But the Queen only leaned closer, intrigued. No, she replied inside his mind. It is not normal. My people think in lines. One thought follows the next with perfect order. But your mind, she paused, searching for the right description while watching another random image flash through his thoughts, a memory of a baseball game under bright stadium lights on a warm summer night. Your mind behaves like weather. Daniel raised one eyebrow. Weather? Yes, she said. Sometimes calm. Sometimes chaotic. Always moving. The Queen's gaze sharpened with something deeper than curiosity now. It was the look of someone who had just discovered a puzzle unlike anything she had seen in centuries. Tell me, Daniel Carter, she said quietly within his thoughts, how does a species survive when its mind refuses to remain still? Daniel Carter let the question hang in the air for a moment while the immense chamber remained silent except for the faint humming resonance inside the living crystal walls. The temperature stayed steady and comfortable, but the stillness carried a pressure that reminded him of standing on the runway before takeoff, that quiet second before engines roared to life. Queen Valira stood only a few feet away, studying him with the patient focus of someone observing a rare natural phenomenon. Around them, the alien officials remained perfectly still along the outer ring of the hall, their tall silhouettes framed by columns of glowing violet mineral that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Daniel drew a slow breath and allowed his thoughts to move naturally again, because he knew by now that forcing silence only made the noise louder in his own mind. Humans survive because we do not stop thinking, he finally said aloud, his voice calm and steady in the vast chamber. The Queen listened not only to his words, but to the storm of thoughts swirling behind them. Images rose and vanished in rapid flashes. A crowded highway outside Dallas during rush hour. The bright white arc of a rocket launch on television when he was 8 years old. The feeling of cold metal controls beneath his hands during his first solo flight at 12,000 feet. Each thought appeared without warning, and each one pulled another memory behind it like a chain of sparks. The Queen's golden eyes widened slightly as she followed the pattern. You do not guide your thoughts, she observed quietly inside his mind. They guide you. Daniel considered that for half a second before answering honestly. Sometimes yes. Sometimes they surprise us. The Queen took a slow step closer again, her silver hair shifting softly across her shoulders. Fascination had fully replaced the calm distance she carried earlier. For centuries I have listened to the minds of my people, she said. Their thoughts flow in perfect order. One conclusion leads directly to the next. Strategy, logic, structure. She paused while another wave of Daniel's thoughts flickered through her senses. This time, a random memory of rain tapping against a small airplane windshield while he waited for a storm to pass over the runway. But your mind behaves like a sky filled with shifting clouds. Daniel could not help a faint smile. That actually sounds pretty accurate. The Queen studied him carefully. Chaos normally weakens a civilization. It leads to mistakes, conflict, instability. Yet your species spreads rapidly through the stars. Her gaze sharpened with deep curiosity. That should not be possible. Daniel leaned his weight slightly from one boot to the other, the polished mineral floor cool beneath his soles. Maybe chaos is not always a weakness, he said. The Queen tilted her head. Explain. Daniel thought for a moment. and she felt the hesitation before the idea formed. Because if you only think in straight lines, he said slowly, you only see one road forward. Another memory flickered in his thoughts as he spoke, the image of a cracked dirt road outside a small Texas town stretching into the open horizon beneath a wide blue sky. But when your thoughts move everywhere at once, he continued, you notice roads no one planned to build. The Queen fell silent. For the first time since he had entered the chamber, she did not immediately respond. Instead, she watched the unpredictable flow of his mind, as if witnessing weather patterns forming across an entire planet. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter than before. Daniel Carter, she said, your species may possess the most unusual mind I have ever encountered. And that may be exactly why the galaxy does not fully understand you yet. Queen Valera remained silent for several seconds after Daniel finished speaking, and in a hall that large, silence carried its own weight. The violet light in the crystal columns continued their slow pulse, casting long reflections across the smooth mineral floor. Daniel could feel dozens of alien eyes watching from the perimeter of the chamber, but the Queen's attention never left him. Instead, she studied the shifting movement of his thoughts the way a navigator might study unpredictable weather patterns before crossing an ocean. Inside her mind, his thoughts arrived like bursts of wind. A memory of a dusty airfield under the Texas sun appeared, followed immediately by the smell of warm engine oil and the distant laughter of a mechanic telling a joke. Then the memory vanished and was replaced by the quiet concentration of flight school calculations written across a tablet screen. The Queen absorbed each fragment with growing fascination. Your thoughts do not travel in sequence, she said slowly inside his mind. They scatter in every direction. Daniel gave a small shrug. That is kind of how life works where I come from. The Queen stepped closer again, close enough that Daniel could see faint patterns of light moving beneath her turquoise skin, like soft currents beneath clear water. For a moment, she did not speak at all. Instead, she began doing something different. Rather than simply listening to his thoughts, she gently pushed her own presence deeper into his mind. Daniel felt the sensation immediately. It was not painful, but it felt like standing near a powerful radio tower where invisible signals filled the air. His thoughts reacted instinctively, scattering even faster as random ideas sparked and disappeared. The Queen tilted her head with interest. You feel that? She said. Daniel nodded once. Feels like someone just turned up the volume inside my head. That is a reasonable description, she replied. I am increasing my focus. Daniel understood what she was trying to do. She was not attacking him. She was testing the boundaries of his mind. The alien officials around the chamber whispered again in their own language, clearly uneasy with the experiment, but the Queen raised one hand slightly and the whispers stopped. Her attention returned entirely to Daniel. Let us try something simple, she said calmly. Think about only one thing. Hold the thought as long as possible. Daniel considered the request. That sounded easy in theory, but he already knew how his mind worked. Still, he decided to try. He focused on a single image. The endless blue horizon above Earth when you reach cruising altitude at 30,000 feet. The thin white line where sky meets the curve of the planet. For 2 seconds the image held steady. The Queen watched closely. 3 seconds. 4. Then another thought slipped in without warning. The memory of turbulence shaking the aircraft cabin during a summer storm. Then the smell of coffee from a roadside diner after landing. Then the distant echo of a baseball crowd cheering under bright stadium lights. The chain reaction of thoughts spread outward instantly. The Queen blinked in surprise. You did not release the thought, she said quietly. Daniel exhaled slowly. No, the others just showed up anyway. The Queen stepped back half a pace, astonishment now clearly visible in her golden eyes. That should not happen, she said. A trained mind should maintain control. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck thoughtfully. Maybe that is the difference. Human minds are not trained to stay perfectly controlled all the time. The Queen studied him again, but this time her curiosity had deepened into something else. Something almost like admiration. Because the storm inside his mind had just revealed something remarkable. Even when she pushed harder with her telepathic focus, Daniel's thoughts did not become orderly. They became even more unpredictable, and that unpredictability made them impossible to fully control. Queen Valera slowly withdrew the pressure of her telepathic focus, Yet the sensation lingered in Daniel Carter's mind like the fading echo of a loud engine after shutdown. The great chamber returned to its quiet rhythm, violet light pulsing gently through the towering crystal columns, while distant mechanical tones vibrated through the structure of the palace. Daniel rolled his shoulders slightly, letting his breathing settle into a calm pattern. The queen remained only a few feet away, studying him with an intensity that now bordered on disbelief. "Your mind resisted my focus," she said quietly inside his thoughts. Daniel lifted one eyebrow. "I did not try to resist." "Exactly," the queen replied. "That is what makes it remarkable." She began to walk again in a slow circle around him, observing the shifting patterns of his thoughts the way a scientist might observe electrical signals on a monitor. Daniel noticed that the alien officials along the edge of the chamber had grown even more uneasy. Their tall forms leaned toward one another in quiet conversations, but none dared interrupt the queen. She stopped again in front of him. "Daniel Carter," she said calmly, "my species has studied thousands of intelligent civilizations across this galaxy. Telepathy has always given us a clear advantage. When we listen to another mind, we understand its intentions. We predict its decisions. We guide outcomes before they even occur." Daniel nodded slightly. "Sounds efficient." "It is," she said, "but efficiency requires order." Her golden eyes sharpened as she listened again to the unpredictable current of his thoughts. A fragment of music from an old radio station flickered through his mind, followed immediately by a memory of standing on a quiet hill outside Austin watching a thunderstorm roll across the horizon. Another image appeared of a training instructor explaining emergency procedures beside a small aircraft wing. None of the thoughts connected logically, yet each one carried emotion and detail. The queen absorbed them all. "Your mind does not move toward a single outcome," she continued. "It explores possibilities constantly." Daniel shrugged. "Humans like options." That statement caused a small ripple of reaction among the alien observers. The queen noticed, but did not look away from Daniel. "Options introduce uncertainty," she said. "Uncertainty creates instability." Daniel thought about that for a moment. Maybe, but it also creates new ideas. The queen paused. She sensed another wave of thoughts forming in his mind. This time the memory was simple and clear. A small boy watching a paper airplane glide across a classroom, while wondering if one day he might build a real one that could reach the stars. The thought was followed immediately by dozens of imagined designs, impossible shapes of aircraft that had never existed but might someday become real. The queen inhaled slowly. "You imagine possibilities even when they do not yet exist." Daniel nodded. "That is kind of the whole point of thinking." The queen stepped back half a pace, her expression shifting from curiosity into something deeper, something thoughtful. "For centuries," she said quietly, "my people believed that order was the highest form of intelligence. Perfect structure, perfect clarity, perfect control." She looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "But control requires predictability. And your mind is anything but predictable." Daniel gave a small smile. "That probably explains a lot about humans." The queen studied him for another long moment, then allowed a faint smile of her own to appear. "Yes," she said softly within his thoughts. "It explains why your species is far more dangerous than the galaxy realizes." The words lingered in the quiet air of the crystal hall. Far more dangerous than the galaxy realizes. Daniel Carter let that sentence settle in his mind, while the violet light from the towering columns shifted slowly across the polished floor. For a moment, he wondered if he should feel insulted or proud. Instead, he simply breathed and allowed his thoughts to move the way they always did, drifting like clouds across a wide sky. The queen watched them closely. A faint memory surfaced of a late evening in a small Texas town, the smell of barbecue smoke drifting across a warm summer street, while a radio played soft country music somewhere nearby. The memory passed quickly, replaced by the image of a navigation display glowing inside a cockpit at 30,000 feet. Queen Valira followed the shifting images with intense focus. "Your thoughts move faster than most neural systems can process," she said quietly inside his mind. Daniel gave a small shrug. "Humans get bored if we think too slowly." That answer caused a subtle reaction among the alien officials around the edge of the chamber. One of them stepped forward slightly, tall and armored in dark reflective plating that caught the purple light of the columns. His voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and uneasy. "Your Majesty, This human demonstrates unstable cognitive behavior. The risk of allowing such a mind within the imperial hall is unnecessary. The queen did not turn to face him. Instead, she continued watching Daniel's thoughts as if the rest of the chamber had faded into the background. Unstable is not the correct word, she said calmly through both spoken voice and telepathic resonance. Unpredictable is more accurate. The official hesitated. Your Majesty, unpredictability itself creates danger. The queen finally glanced toward him. Yes, that is precisely why it interests me. Silence fell again. Daniel felt another ripple of curiosity move through the queen's mind as she returned her attention to him. She studied the endless flow of small human memories appearing without structure. A bright childhood moment of watching fireworks explode above a lake. The nervous excitement before his first solo flight. The quiet satisfaction of landing safely after a difficult training maneuver. None of the thoughts were strategic or defensive. They simply existed. Tell me something, Daniel Carter, she said softly inside his thoughts. When your mind produces so many possibilities at once, how do you decide which path to follow? Daniel thought about that question for a moment. A dozen possible answers flickered through his head immediately. Logic, instinct, experience, luck. He finally settled on the most honest one. Sometimes we do not decide right away, he said. Sometimes we try one path and see what happens. The queen tilted her head. That approach carries enormous risk. Daniel nodded. It does. But it also means we discover things no one expected to find. The queen's golden eyes brightened slightly as she absorbed that thought. In her experience, every civilization followed patterns that could be mapped and predicted. Entire wars had been prevented because her species could read intentions before actions occurred. But Daniel's mind offered something entirely different. It generated ideas that did not exist until the moment they appeared. Your mind creates possibilities faster than I can analyze them, she admitted quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. Welcome to being human. The queen stood silent again, while the storm of his thoughts continued to unfold before her senses. Then slowly, almost thoughtfully, she spoke once more. If that is true, Daniel Carter, then perhaps the greatest strength of your species is not intelligence or technology. She paused, watching another sudden memory appear in his mind of a small paper airplane drifting across a classroom years ago. Perhaps your greatest strength is imagination. Queen Valira repeated the words silently inside her mind, as if testing its weight. Imagination. The vast crystal hall remained perfectly still while the violet light inside the towering columns shifted slowly across the floor like quiet tides of color. Daniel Carter noticed that even the alien officials surrounding the chamber had grown quieter than before. Their unease had not disappeared, but curiosity had begun to replace some of their earlier suspicion. The queen studied the steady flow of Daniel's thoughts again. A new memory surfaced without warning. A small paper airplane gliding across a classroom, its folded wings catching the sunlight through a window. The image was simple and harmless, yet it carried the excitement of a child discovering the idea of flight for the first time. The queen followed the memory carefully. This thought occurred long before you piloted a real aircraft, she said softly inside his mind. Daniel nodded. I was about 8 years old. The queen's eyes narrowed slightly as she watched the next wave of thoughts appear. The paper airplane turned into the image of a real aircraft cutting across a bright blue sky at 30,000 feet. The cabin instruments glowing softly in the dim cockpit light. The calm satisfaction of maintaining perfect altitude while clouds drifted far below. The connection between the two thoughts fascinated her. Your mind links imagination to reality, she observed. Daniel gave a small smile. That is how inventions usually start. First someone imagines something impossible. Then someone else tries to build it. The queen slowly circled him again, her silver hair moving gently with each step. Around the edge of the chamber, several alien officials watched with growing concern. One of them stepped forward once more, his voice respectful but tense. Your Majesty, this human mind displays uncontrolled expansion of speculative thought. Such cognition cannot be predicted. The queen turned her head slightly toward him. That is precisely the point, she replied calmly. The official hesitated. A civilization built on unpredictability cannot be stable. The queen returned her gaze to Daniel. Or perhaps it evolves faster because of that instability. The official said nothing further. Daniel shifted his weight slightly, listening as the Queen's attention returned fully to the storm of thoughts inside his head. Another memory drifted through his mind, this one quieter than the others. A late night in a small apartment near a training airfield. A young Daniel sitting beside a cluttered desk, sketching aircraft designs that he knew would never actually fly. Strange wing shapes, unusual engine placements, ideas that broke every rule his instructors had taught him. The Queen absorbed the memory slowly. You imagined designs that violated your own engineering principles, she said. Daniel nodded once. Sometimes breaking the rules helps you understand why they exist. The Queen considered that statement carefully. Her species valued perfection in every design. Every machine built by the Thalrin Empire followed exact calculations refined over centuries. Yet Daniel's mind produced constant experiments even when failure was likely. That approach seemed reckless, but it also revealed something extraordinary. Your species explores ideas without certainty of success, she said quietly. Daniel shrugged. That is called curiosity. The Queen stood still for a long moment, while another wave of unpredictable thoughts passed through her senses. Finally she spoke again, her voice softer now. Daniel Carter, if imagination allows your species to see possibilities that do not yet exist, then telepathy alone may never fully understand you. Daniel lifted an eyebrow. Why not? The Queen's golden eyes reflected the soft violet glow of the chamber as she answered. Because your next idea might not exist until the exact moment you think it. Queen Valera allowed the silence to linger after her last words, and the enormous crystal chamber seemed to breathe with the slow rhythm of the glowing violet columns. Daniel Carter shifted slightly where he stood, feeling the smooth mineral floor beneath his boots and the faint warmth of the hall's climate system holding the air at a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Around them the alien officials remained in a careful semicircle, their tall forms rigid with discipline, but their attention had clearly sharpened. The conversation had moved far beyond the simple interrogation they expected. The Queen's golden eyes remained locked on Daniel as she listened to the quiet storm inside his mind. Another small wave of human thoughts drifted upward without structure. The smell of rain hitting hot pavement. The low rumble of an airplane engine idling on a runway. The taste of diner coffee that had been far too strong, but somehow perfect after a long flight. None of these thoughts had anything to do with survival or strategy, yet they carried emotional weight. The Queen absorbed them with growing fascination. Your mind produces constant sensory fragments, she said softly inside his thoughts. Daniel gave a small shrug. That is how memories work for us. The Queen tilted her head slightly as she studied the pattern. No, she corrected gently. For most species, memories are organized records. Yours behave more like sparks from a fire. Daniel thought about that description for a moment and then nodded. That actually sounds pretty accurate. A quiet murmur spread among the alien officials along the edge of the chamber. One of them stepped forward again, the dark plates of his uniform reflecting the violet glow of the hall. Your Majesty, he said carefully, this discussion continues to reveal dangerous irregularities in human cognition. A mind that cannot be predicted cannot be safely negotiated with. The Queen looked toward him calmly. You believe predictability is the foundation of diplomacy, she replied. The official inclined his head. Yes, Your Majesty. If intentions can be read, conflict can be avoided. The Queen slowly turned her gaze back toward Daniel. That assumption may be incomplete. Daniel watched the exchange quietly, letting his thoughts wander as they naturally did. An image of a chessboard appeared in his mind, followed by the memory of losing a game to his grandfather when he was 10 years old. The Queen noticed immediately. That game involves strategy, she said. Daniel smiled faintly. It does, but good players win by doing something the opponent does not expect. The Queen's eyes brightened slightly. Exactly. She turned again toward the alien officials, observing the conversation. If a civilization always follows predictable logic, its decisions can eventually be anticipated by an enemy. The official hesitated. That is correct, Your Majesty. The Queen gestured subtly toward Daniel. But what happens when a species generates ideas faster than they can be predicted? Silence fell across the chamber. Daniel could feel the Queen studying the constant movement of his thoughts again. A new idea suddenly formed in his mind, completely unrelated to the discussion. What if alien aircraft used rotating wing geometry instead of fixed structures? The queen blinked slightly as the strange concept flashed through her senses. That idea did not exist a moment ago, she said quietly. Daniel shrugged. That is imagination again. The queen slowly folded her hands behind her back as realization spread through her mind. For centuries her people believed telepathy guaranteed control over diplomacy and warfare. But Daniel Carter had just demonstrated something unsettling. Even when she listened perfectly, the next thought could still surprise her. And that meant something remarkable. A human mind could never be fully predicted, even by a queen who could hear every thought. Queen Valera remained motionless after the realization settled in her mind. And for the first time since Daniel Carter had entered the hall, the vast chamber felt less like a throne room and more like a laboratory of ideas. The violet light from the towering crystal columns continued its slow pulse across the smooth floor, reflecting softly along the polished surfaces of the alien officials standing in silent formation around the perimeter. Daniel noticed that none of them were whispering now. Every eye in the room was fixed on the strange exchange unfolding at the center of the hall. The queen continued listening to the unpredictable current of his thoughts. Another fragment surfaced without warning. The memory of standing on a runway at sunrise while the sky turned orange over a line of distant mountains. The sound of wind brushing across the metal wing of a training aircraft. The calm excitement of knowing that a new flight would begin in a few minutes. The queen absorbed the memory carefully. Your mind returns often to the idea of flight, she said quietly inside his thoughts. Daniel nodded. Humans spent thousands of years imagining it before we finally figured it out. The queen studied that statement as another chain of thoughts unfolded. The image of early airplanes made from wood and fabric appeared in his mind, followed by sleek jetliners crossing continents at 500 miles per hour, and then spacecraft leaving Earth's atmosphere entirely. The progression fascinated her. You imagined flight long before the technology existed to achieve it, she said. Daniel shrugged lightly. That is how imagination works. First you dream about something impossible. Then someone stubborn enough tries to make it real. The queen slowly began walking again, circling him while watching the constant sparks of new ideas forming inside his thoughts. The alien officials remained silent, but their posture revealed growing tension. One of them finally spoke again, his voice cautious but firm. Your Majesty, this human demonstrates mental patterns that cannot be mapped or predicted. That characteristic alone should classify his species as strategically unstable. The queen stopped and looked toward the official. Or strategically adaptive, she replied. The official hesitated. Uncertainty still creates danger. The queen nodded once. Yes, but danger also creates progress. She turned back to Daniel, her golden eyes bright with deep curiosity. Tell me something, Daniel Carter. When your species encounters a problem that logic alone cannot solve, what do you do? Daniel thought about that for a moment. Several possible answers flickered through his mind immediately. Experiment. Try something unusual. Ask a different question. But the thought that rose strongest came from an old lesson he remembered from flight school. Sometimes you stop trying to follow the expected solution and you invent a new one. The queen felt that idea clearly as it formed. Inventing a solution that does not yet exist, she repeated softly. Daniel nodded. Happens more often than people think. The queen stood silent again, while a new thought suddenly sparked inside Daniel's mind without warning. What if alien starships used variable gravity corridors to bend interior space for faster navigation? The concept appeared only for a second before dissolving into other random ideas. But it was enough. The queen blinked slowly as she realized something remarkable. That concept had not existed anywhere in the Empire's scientific archives. It had appeared spontaneously in a human mind within seconds. She looked at Daniel with a mixture of fascination and caution. Daniel Carter, she said quietly inside his thoughts. A mind that can create new ideas faster than they can be analyzed may become the most powerful force in the galaxy. Queen Valera did not immediately respond after Daniel Carter's thought faded from her senses, and the vast throne hall remained wrapped in a deep and thoughtful silence. The towering crystal columns continued their slow pulse of violet light, while faint mechanical vibrations hummed somewhere deep within the structure of the palace. Daniel stood calmly at the center of the chamber, his posture relaxed but alert, while dozens of alien officials watched from the perimeter with a mixture of caution and fascination. The queen's golden eyes remained fixed on him as she studied the unpredictable current of his mind. The strange concept he had imagined moments earlier still lingered in her awareness like a spark that had briefly illuminated an entire landscape of possibility. For centuries, her people had believed that telepathy granted them a perfect understanding of other intelligent species. If a mind could be heard, it could be predicted. If it could be predicted, it could be guided. Yet Daniel's thoughts continued to prove otherwise. A new chain of ideas flickered through his mind without warning. The memory of standing beside a dusty airstrip while a small training aircraft taxied slowly across the runway appeared first. Then the thought shifted to the complicated calculations of fuel range and weather patterns that every pilot learned to respect. Seconds later, the idea dissolved into something entirely different. A random curiosity about how alien navigation systems handled gravitational distortions near dense stars. The queen felt the shift instantly. Your mind never remains still long enough for full analysis, she said quietly inside his thoughts. Daniel gave a small smile. That is kind of the problem and the advantage at the same time. The queen tilted her head slightly. Explain. Daniel considered the question carefully while another cluster of thoughts passed through his mind. Humans make decisions even when we do not have perfect information, he said slowly. Sometimes we just take the best idea available and try it. The queen listened carefully. That approach would create enormous uncertainty. Daniel nodded. It does. But waiting for perfect certainty usually means nothing ever changes. The alien officials along the outer ring shifted uneasily at that statement. One of them stepped forward again, his voice firm but controlled. Your Majesty, this confirms the instability of human decision-making. A civilization that acts without complete analysis risks catastrophic errors. The queen turned slightly toward him, though her attention remained mostly focused on Daniel. Or it discovers solutions that structured analysis would never attempt. The official hesitated but did not respond. The queen returned her full attention to the human standing before her. Daniel Carter, she said quietly, my people believe that hearing a mind meant understanding it completely. Yet even now, while I listen to every thought you produce, I still cannot predict what you will think next. Daniel shrugged slightly. Neither can I most of the time. The queen allowed a faint smile to appear. That may be the most honest explanation I have heard today. She stepped a little closer, studying the restless storm of ideas flowing through his mind like shifting weather across an open sky. Then she spoke again, her voice calm but thoughtful. A mind that cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. Daniel nodded once. That sounds about right. The queen's golden eyes reflected the violet glow of the chamber as she finished her thought. Which means the greatest strength of your species may not be your technology or your courage. She paused for a moment while another unpredictable idea flashed through his thoughts. It may be the simple fact that no one in the galaxy can ever fully know what a human will think next. Queen Velara let the final words echo quietly through the vast chamber, and the silence that followed felt different from the earlier pauses in their conversation. This silence carried weight, like the moment before a major discovery settles into understanding. The violet glow from the crystal pillars stretched across the floor, while the distant hum of the palace systems continued at a steady rhythm. Daniel Carter stood calmly where he had been since the beginning, hands relaxed at his sides, his mind continuing to wander through the natural patterns of human thought. The queen remained very still as she listened. Another series of memories passed through her senses. A small roadside diner glowing under yellow lights during a late-night road trip. The smell of fresh coffee filling the air while truck engines rumbled quietly outside. The memory faded and was replaced by the quiet concentration of studying navigation charts during flight training. Then the thought shifted again to the simple curiosity of how alien starships might manage gravity fields during hyperspace travel. None of the thoughts formed a clear strategic plan. Yet each one carried creative potential. The queen slowly exhaled, something that rarely happened when she was deep in telepathic focus. Your thoughts behave like exploration, she said softly inside his mind. Daniel nodded. That sounds about right. The queen stepped away from him for the first time since the conversation began, walking a slow half circle across the polished floor. The alien officials around the chamber watched carefully, sensing that the tone of the exchange had shifted. One of them stepped forward again, speaking cautiously. Your Majesty, The human mind clearly lacks the structural discipline required for stable interstellar diplomacy. Such unpredictability could create strategic risk if allowed influence beyond this chamber. The Queen stopped walking but did not immediately answer. Instead, she looked toward Daniel again, studying the restless movement of ideas inside his mind. A sudden image appeared there without warning. A child standing on a hill watching a kite lift into the wind, wondering if one day machines could fly higher than birds. The Queen absorbed the image quietly. Then she turned toward the official who had spoken. "You believe discipline alone produces progress," she said calmly. The official inclined his head. "Yes, Your Majesty. Structure ensures stability." The Queen gestured subtly toward Daniel. "Yet the species before us imagined flight thousands of years before achieving it. They imagined leaving their planet long before their technology allowed it." The official hesitated. "That does not change the risks." The Queen's golden eyes sharpened slightly. "No, but it reveals something more important." She turned fully toward Daniel again. "A mind that cannot be predicted also cannot be easily manipulated." Daniel raised one eyebrow. "That might be the nicest compliment humans have received in a while." The Queen allowed a faint smile. "It is not a compliment. It is an observation." She paused for a moment while another new idea flashed through his thoughts. What if artificial gravity rings could rotate at variable speeds to create adjustable planetary simulation environments? The Queen felt the idea form instantly and disappear just as quickly. She shook her head slowly in quiet amazement. "Daniel Carter," she said softly inside his thoughts, "even when I listen to every signal in your mind, your next idea still surprises me." Daniel gave a small shrug. "That happens to us too." The Queen studied him for another long moment before speaking again. "Which means your species may possess something my empire has never truly encountered before." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "And what would that be?" The Queen answered calmly. "The ability to change the future faster than anyone else can predict it." Queen Valera allowed the statement to settle across the chamber, and for several seconds the only movement in the vast hall came from the slow pulse of violet light flowing through the towering crystal columns. Daniel Carter remained where he stood, calm but thoughtful, while the Queen's words echoed quietly in his mind. The ability to change the future faster than anyone else can predict it. Around the outer ring of the hall the alien officials shifted uneasily. That idea alone challenged centuries of certainty within the Thalrin Empire. One of the senior officials finally stepped forward again, his voice careful but firm. "Your Majesty, the implications of this conclusion are troubling. If human cognition truly operates beyond predictive telepathic analysis, then their species represents a strategic anomaly." The Queen turned slightly toward him. "Yes," she replied calmly. "That is exactly what they represent." The official hesitated before continuing. "Such an anomaly cannot be safely integrated into existing diplomatic frameworks." The Queen listened to the concern but did not appear alarmed. Instead, she slowly looked back toward Daniel, observing the quiet storm of thoughts still moving through his mind. A new memory surfaced there. The image of standing beside a runway at dawn while the first light of morning spread across the sky. The smell of cool air and jet fuel mixing together. The anticipation of an aircraft lifting into the open horizon. The Queen absorbed the memory with deep attention. "Your species constantly looks forward," she said quietly inside his thoughts. Daniel nodded. "That is how exploration works. You keep asking what might exist beyond the next horizon." The Queen walked slowly past him, her silver hair moving softly with each step as she considered the implications of that mindset. Behind her, the alien officials waited for a clear command, but she did not give one yet. Instead, she allowed herself to observe the human mind one more time without interference. Another unexpected idea appeared within Daniel's thoughts. A concept involving rotating orbital habitats that could simulate Earth gravity for long-duration space travel. The idea was not complete. It barely existed for more than a second before dissolving into other thoughts about navigation systems and star charts. Yet the Queen understood what it represented. Creativity that appeared instantly, without preparation and without limitation. She finally stopped walking and faced the gathered officials of her court. "For centuries," she said calmly, "our empire believed that telepathy granted us complete strategic awareness. If we could hear a mind, we could predict its actions. If we could predict its actions, we could guide the outcome of events. The officials listened carefully. The Queen gestured gently toward Daniel. Today we have encountered a species that challenges that assumption. The official who had spoken earlier lowered his head slightly. Then the human mind cannot be fully controlled through telepathic observation. Correct, the Queen replied. Silence filled the chamber again as the meaning of that conclusion settled among the court. Finally, the Queen turned back toward Daniel Carter and looked directly into his eyes. Your species possesses something that no telepathic empire can fully contain. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And what is that? The Queen answered quietly inside his thoughts. The power of ideas that do not exist until the moment a human imagines them. Queen Valira's final words settled across the crystal hall like the quiet echo of a distant bell, and for a long moment no one moved. The towering pillars continued to glow with their slow violet rhythm, casting gentle reflections across the polished mineral floor, while the distant hum of the palace systems carried through the structure like the steady pulse of a living organism. Daniel Carter stood at the center of the chamber, feeling dozens of alien eyes resting on him. Yet the only gaze that truly mattered remained the Queen's. She continued listening to his thoughts, though now her attention carried a new quality. It was no longer analysis alone. It was something closer to respect. A simple memory surfaced in Daniel's mind without intention. The image of standing on a quiet hill outside a small Texas town while watching the sunset stretch across an endless sky. The thought carried no strategy, no calculation, only the calm appreciation of a wide horizon waiting to be explored. The Queen absorbed the moment with quiet fascination. Your species constantly looks outward, she said softly inside his thoughts. Daniel gave a small nod. That is kind of what we do. The Queen studied him for another second before finally turning toward the assembled officials surrounding the hall. For centuries, the Thalrin Empire believed that telepathy allowed us to understand every mind we encountered, she said calmly. If we could hear a thought, we believed we could predict its direction. Several officials lowered their heads slightly, acknowledging the long-held doctrine. The Queen gestured gently toward Daniel Carter. Yet today we have encountered a mind that demonstrates a different principle entirely. The official who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his voice cautious. Your Majesty, are you suggesting that human cognition lies beyond telepathic control? The Queen answered without hesitation. I am suggesting that human cognition evolves faster than telepathic analysis can contain it. The chamber fell silent once more. The Queen slowly turned back toward Daniel. Even now, while I listen to every signal in your mind, new ideas continue to appear without warning. Daniel allowed a faint smile. That happens to humans a lot. The Queen's golden eyes reflected the soft violet light as she considered that simple statement. For a telepathic civilization built upon order and predictability, the concept was both unsettling and extraordinary. A mind that constantly generates new possibilities cannot be fully predicted, she said quietly. And a future that cannot be predicted cannot be fully controlled. Daniel raised one eyebrow. Sounds like that makes humans complicated neighbors. The Queen allowed a small smile in return. Perhaps, but it also makes your species valuable allies. The alien officials exchanged uncertain glances, realizing that the conversation had reached a conclusion none of them expected. The Queen finally lifted one hand, signaling the end of the session. Daniel Carter, she said calmly inside his thoughts, today you have demonstrated something remarkable to my empire. Daniel waited. The Queen looked directly at him as she spoke her final words. The galaxy has long feared species that think too slowly to change. But perhaps it should pay closer attention to a species that can imagine the future faster than anyone else can predict it. And for the first time since he had entered the hall, Daniel realized that the Queen was no longer studying a prisoner. She was studying the beginning of a new possibility.